Afternoon. We'll get going in just a few minutes. We'll let people log on, and then we'll have pretty much a general discussion today. We did have, to those just logging on, there was a plan to have a candidate for Board of Ed on. There's an illness in his family. He was not able to come on, so we will reschedule him for either later in the week or next week before we. He's the last one. So we want to make sure we get at least everybody, the opportunity to come on. So we had to change that for today. So today there's like nothing specific planned, just a general discussion. We'll talk about some things in the news in West Haven, which is interesting. And we'll talk about sports betting, which is always fun, and kind of some fun stuff there. So give us a minute and we'll get going. To those that are, yesterday I was in the town center here in Brantford, and a few things jumped out at me. One, Kim, good afternoon. A few things jumped out at me at the center. I know politically people are saying the center isn't what it could be, but I don't know what planet you're on. Because I walked around the center, there were people all over the green. We had the scarecrows on the green. There were people sitting outside at pretty much every restaurant there was, from Shoreline Cafe all the way up to G Cafe or Whole G Cafe. I ate at Whole G. That was packed. I talked to some real estate agents who told me how vibrant the area is, and the demand for Brantford right now, the demand for commercial space is through the roof. So, and I've said this before, I've always kind of been dumbfounded by why people want to slam their own town. I get politically why they do it, especially in a race, but Brantford Center is like, in a very real sense, other towns are jealous of our center. It's not. Guilford has a nice little space, but their green is kind of dead most days. They have like 7 or 8 stores where Amarone's is, that sort of thing, but their green is kind of dead. The Brantford's always something going on, a little smaller, but it's like brighter and more vibrant, and there's so much more happening in our town center. And so going around, it really is. Kristen, how are you? And going around town and talking to real estate agents, and then talking to town hall employees and seeing where fit up applications are. So what a fit up application is when somebody comes to planning and zoning and wants to put a retail outlet where a previous retail outlet was, they don't need to go to planning and zoning, the commission for that. They could just get a fit up outfit. If it was a restaurant before, it could become a restaurant again. They still have to get fire approval, that kind of thing, but it's a much simpler process. And so you go and look. And so going around town yesterday, and seeing some posts from real estate agents, we saw one, Massimo's, the hair salon, is moving across the street to where the gun shop was before. He expanded, which is a good sign for him. His gun demand, or whatever he was selling, demand increased. He moved somewhere else. The hair salon's expanding, going across the street. Right next to that was a building, I guess that was vacant, will be a wine bar. It's a pretty small space, and the wine bar we've tried before. There was a wine bar called Swill, tough name for a wine bar, by the way, but still called Swill, run by Franco Camacho, who's a brilliant, brilliant chef, down the bottom of the hill near Shoreline Cafe. That didn't last very long. They changed to Waterhouse, and they kind of made some changes in there. That said, a wine bar is going there. Moving further up, right next to GZen, it's not in GZen, Whole G, a interior design, architectural design business is moving into that location. So the reason I'm telling you this is after I posted these pictures about the town center, and I have a million pictures on scarecrows on the green, but after I posted it on social media, somebody posted, "This is not like the mailer that was sent out today." And I said, "What mailer?" And it was a mailer sent out by Tom Brockett, and it's a picture of 3 vacant places in Brantford, and it says, "Oh my God, under this administration, there's all these vacancies," or something along those lines. Okay. First of all, you can go to any town, anywhere, in any country, no matter the level of economic development, and find 3 vacant spaces. That means nothing. What made this mailer so bad was they took a picture of where Myers Flowers was. Now, Myers Flowers retired. They didn't go out of business. They didn't leave town. They retired. And the business actually is continuing strictly online. So the owner was elderly, was there for years and years, an iconic business. It's going online. It's sold, just doing online only. So that space was available. But whoever took the pictures in the Brockett campaign took a picture with the windows, with paper over the windows. Now, to anyone who has any sort of real estate acumen or business acumen. When a property is for rent, you leave the windows uncovered. You want people to see the space inside. When it's rented and they start working on the inside, you cover the windows. Brockett sent out in a mailer a picture of a building with the windows covered. Said it's vacant. There's a tenant going in there. You took a picture with it covered because you didn't know any better. What it tells me is you have no idea what you're doing. They're already getting work done in there. The person who's opening it was at Whole G having lunch yesterday while I was there. And I'm just amazed that they send out these mailers trashing their own town. Do you not understand how real estate works? That when it's covered, it's rented. There's no more for rent sign anywhere on the window. There's a reason the paper's on the window because they're working inside. Do you not understand this? What it tells me is Mr. Brockett or anybody in that campaign has no idea how to talk to a real estate agent or find out that demand for commercial space in Brantford is through the roof right now. It's through the roof. I feel bad for BACA. If you haven't been to BACA's, the Brantford Arts and Cultural Alliance, and they rented or have a deal with Vigliotti for space that was a former chain. That chain shut down of outdoor goods. And the whole space is set up as an art space. There's pictures and paintings, whatever, on the wall, and it's beautiful. At some point, somebody's going to come there and take it. But the demand is through the roof right now. There's another little gift shop. I haven't been to it yet. Gift shop, and if somebody knows the name of it, let me know. On Mona Luis. I just don't remember at the top of my head, but I should give them a shout out there. La Cuisine shut down just when COVID started, and a new prepared meals place opened there on the other side of town, up by exit 56 on the Guilford line. There's a huge, huge demand for business in Brantford right now. Anybody who claims that the town center is struggling is crazy. On top of that, there is a multi-million-dollar project starting next year to improve the parking lots. Nona Gia's, okay. To improve the parking lots, to improve the walkways, to improve the sidewalks. All of that is already in the works. We've had public hearings on it already, and that's starting next year. We've hired a part-time economic development coordinator who met last week with all of the, and I also believe Colin Sheen was in that meeting with all the business owners from the center of town. Colin, good to have you on. Gracious Gifts in Home. Okay, thank you very much. So this idea that Brantford Center is struggling just means you haven't been in Brantford Center. Because I was there yesterday, and it was as vibrant as it gets. I just don't know where these people are getting their information. Now, I get an election. As you get towards the end of election season, the people who are behind or the people who are challenging have to create an alternative reality. They have to say how awful things are. I just don't know that I could ever bring myself to trash my own town. I don't know that I could ever bring myself to want to paint my own town in a negative light for political gain or otherwise. And I just don't get it. So, it is what it is, but I'm proud of our center. I think it looks phenomenal. I enjoy being there. I enjoy, Colin Sheehan's on here, the effort he put in. That was a big hire by Cosgrove. He had to fight for that. It was part-time, then it was full-time. And he's someone who's added a lot to the town, a lot of theater stuff, a lot of kid stuff, and also a lot of music on the green. That's Colin Sheehan. He's done a lot of that stuff, picking those bands, getting that music there, despite not having jazz on the green, picking smaller bands that can go in there and do that. So I don't know what planet Tom Brockett's on. I know the kid running the campaign, and maybe I shouldn't say kid, okay? Somebody said yesterday is 35. Fine. The gentleman running the campaign, who's been here for less than 2 years, may not know Brantford. But Tom Brockett should. Ray Dunbar should. That's just not true. And it's just amazing to see that mailer go out. And then that huge disaster of sending out a picture of a so-called vacant building with paper on the windows, which means it's no longer vacant. It means there's a tenant. There's somebody working inside. That's why they put paper on the windows. And it's a little bit crazy. And so we have actually more stuff too over where Sherry's Bakery was. I think some little bar is going in there, and then potentially a beach donut location next to it. So that's good news. So there's a ton of stuff going on. And on top of that, when you add in, I think the biggest project in town, quite frankly, is replacing Days Inn with high-end residential apartments. I think that is spectacular for a lot of reasons. One, it takes away the police having to go to days in, right? It takes away that. So that's a big deal for me. I like having less demand on our police services by taking away the motels are a regular. Like I go to Capone's Pizza Bar a lot. Behind Capone's is Motel 6 or 8 or whatever it is. Cops are there all the time. So, days in is kind of the same thing. But putting high-end residential units in there, bringing in people who are high earners to Brantford is phenomenal for business. They eat out all the time. Phenomenal for restaurants. And if you don't think our restaurants are doing well, I don't know what planet you're on. The Rosso Vino turns over 2-3 times a night. There's lines out the door in Short Beach at Rosso Vino. Pasta Cosi's busy as hell. I know Cafe Fiore's busy. The places in town are busy. So this question of economic development doesn't make any sense. I also did a chart the other day comparing tax rates, mill rate, in Brantford to Guilford to East Haven to North Brantford to, I believe, Cheshire, North Haven, Hamden. Brantford's by far the lowest. Madison's a little lower, but a very different demographic. Madison doesn't have the demographic we have. They don't have the social service needs that we have. Brantford has some of the largest collection of trailer parks in the state. In the state. We have wealthy people on the Thimble Islands, and we have the poorest of the poor in the same town, and we take care of them. We pay for those things. Madison doesn't have to do that. So there's massive, massive difference. And I'm sorry, but Brantford's a great town. I chose this town, and I got lucky. It's a phenomenal town, and it's hard to see mailers that are just trashing the town over and over and over again. It doesn't make any sense. Beach Donuts is planning on over by in the Sherry's area. I don't know if they're baking there, but they're planning on opening a second location there. Five Below I've never been in, and Music on the Green was great. Colin did a great job, and he always does, and that's why I advocated for him to be a full-time person. He's been a great addition to our town, and so. And as parents know, there's been a huge increase in the amount of services that we provide as a town. So, listen. You want to go after the current town government, you can. You have a right to. Everybody has a right to run for office. Can't take that away from anybody. And Cosgrove and the people who are in office now should have to defend their record. And I think they have. When you have an opponent creating what is essentially an alternative universe where, the senior center was $4 million over budget. What? There's a $29,000 surplus. And I called Jim Finch a couple days ago and asked him. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. His first request to me was, where's this coming from? So we never heard anything about this. Nothing remotely close to this. We get to election season and it was $4 million over. I was in all those meetings. I know what passed. I don't know what you're talking about. The animal shelter was $1.7 million over. Well, here's the problem. Yes, there was an initial estimate that passed. It went out for bid. Those bids came in significantly higher. COVID drove up everything. But what makes that so unreal is in making that claim, Mr. Brockett left out that he voted for it. It's one thing if he said, no, I'm not voting for this, but he voted for it. And the Democrats, his campaign was really, really conflicted about it. It was because they had some guy named John Hartman or Hartwell or something like that stand up at a Board of Finance meeting and just destroy the animal shelter, trash it. He actually said, I agree with Wayne Cook, and this is crazy math, and you shouldn't do this, and this is a terrible project. And we knew it was political. This guy was from Westport or something. He lived there for a year or two and was working with the Democratic Party. And he's trashing this project to the point that Joe Mooney, Jim Finch gets up and starts defending his record, and Joe Mooney goes, don't bother. We know the work you do. We don't need to hear this stuff. It was idiotic. And then suddenly the whole tenor of the Democrats changed from fight the project to we shouldn't fight this anymore. And then they voted for it. And then still come out with mailers saying it's over budget. You voted for it. Huh? What is this alternative universe that you live in or that you're trying to create? And so there's a legitimate question to ask is lying to people and sending out false mailers and trying to create that alternative universe, does it work? I'm betting on no. In my history, in covering elections, it has not worked. Other people have tried it. I don't think people in Brantford are stupid. We saw from the Linda Mallow election, there's probably about 2,400 to 2,500 people who are just going to vote the Democratic one, no matter what. Is there a way to add 1,000, 1,500 more voters of people who are either disgruntled in some way, shape, or form, or don't normally vote and convinced to vote in a local election for no reason to come out and vote, that's a huge order. That's a tall order, especially when Cosgrove is known and liked. You also have to remember this about this election. And I'm going on about this a little more than I wanted to, but just about this election. The $29,000 eventually goes into what we call the undesignated fund balance. Now, there is so what happens to the extra money after all these projects are done? There's always something. In every project is built what's called contingency. And contingency is what if, right? So maybe it's about 5 to 10% of a project. If a project is $10 million, we build in $500,000 or what have you in contingency. So there's always some extra money left over after that. That money typically, once the project is closed out, which is usually a year or two after it's done, it's returned to what's called the undesignated fund balance, which is just the money we have on hand. We have on hand right now about $28 million. That's, from a budget standpoint, probably 22 or 23% of our overall budget, which is fine. Standard & Poor's has been fine with that. Moody's rating agency has been fine with that. We've consistently gotten very strong ratings from outside financial agencies. So some people have said it should only be 10%. I disagree. Here's what having that money on hand does. To those who say we have too much on hand. When you have a project, and let's suppose interest rates for bonds at that time are 4.5%. All right, that's a little high, or 5 or 6%, whatever. That's high. Then we have the option of using some cash. When interest rates are low, we save that cash, like they are now, and we bond at 2 or 2.5%. So by having the money on hand, we're not forced to borrow money at whatever percentage it's available at. We can now make a decision and say, wait a minute, we can low bond rates, let's bond it, but bond rates are a little high, let's use some cash for it. It provides us options. That's strong management. So I've heard even Republicans say we have too much money on hand. No, that money on hand allows us flexibility. It is just like you wanting to go buy a car, and if you have $20,000 in cash, or you can borrow money, if the interest rate on the car is 1.5 or 2%, you're like, okay, I can do that for the car. But if the interest rate on the car is 10 or 11%, you're like, no, I'm not doing that. You have the option of using your cash. So that extra $29,000 will go to the undesignated fund balance, and that stays there. So every year we take some money out. Now, let's suppose we have a year like a COVID year where we don't know what tax collection is going to be. So typically we collect between 97 and 98% of our tax bill, right? So the bills go out and 98% of it comes back and gets paid fairly quickly. Brantford's consistent. It's been that way, although it's not really who the tax collector is. It's just consistent. People pay their bills here. But let's suppose preparing for COVID, we're like, I don't know if we'll get 98%. Some people may not be able to. They'll lose their jobs. What if we can only get 95%? So then we can take some of that undesignated fund balance, and we did in the past. We took $3 million and put it into the budget to account for potentially being short of that standard 98% collection rate. So having that money on hand allows us to make decisions that other towns don't have. Other towns don't have saved what we have saved. But if we've been able to build up that savings while still keeping the mill rate lower than all our neighboring towns, that's pretty impressive. And add a third category, that we've been able to build up our savings, keeping our mill rate down while putting a tremendous amount of investment into infrastructure. When it comes to senior centers, when it comes to animal shelters, when it comes to a new Walsh Intermediate School, when it comes to a firehouse in Indian Neck, when it comes to taking over Foot Park as a town park, when it comes to building trails on Tabor, when it comes to building solar farms. So all those infrastructure projects cost money. Find me another town that has put as much in infrastructure as Brantford has in the last 8 years in the state. You won't find one. That Brantford's been able to do that is impressive by any measure. And every rating agency continues to give us the highest marks possible. And part of that is our economic development plan. And so what is our economic development plan? What is Brantford doing for economic development? This is not a secret. Jamie Cosgrove has been clear about what that plan is. The first one is, don't look at environmental stuff as that national political debate crap, right? It doesn't have to be about global warming. Being pro-environment is about having a better place to live, having our town be cleaner, be more energy efficient, be more prepared for storms. So we did a few things. We do the open space stuff we do. We started all the environmental commissions. We started the Clean Energy Commission. And we started a fund called the Coastal Resiliency Fund, which was the first in the state, which allows us to fund and invest, which you can't normally do, in the market. That was miles ahead of other towns. We built what was probably the first town-sponsored solar farm along the shoreline. That's been done. Foot Park went from being a private park owned by a trust that was looking at potentially developing it into whatever, homes, taken over by the town, redid those parks, have those fields. Branford Hills School, which was dilapidated, taken down, that's now a park. So making Branford a better place to live by being environmentally friendly is part of economic development. What Cosgrove did, and I think this is him, it's not me, it's not anybody else, it's his mentality, was instead of having that ugly political debate on global warming and sea level rise and all that stuff, let's just say being environmentally prudent is good for economic development. It's good for long-term growth to the town. That's the first step, the first leg of economic development. The second leg is your infrastructure. So there is no real estate agent in town that will tell you that Walsh wasn't a terrible thing for economic development, because there were families that would not come to Walsh Intermediate School because there were no walls. Families were building into the cost of coming to Branford, sending their kid to private school because they didn't want any part of that school. It made no sense. So that was the first thing. And there was a study looking at all the schools. There was discussion about doing signing, which probably still needs to be done. But Walsh impacts everybody. So by investing in that, and now investing in senior centers and all the other services we have, that's phase 2 of economic development. And so this idea that we've heard of, we need somebody to go out and pull businesses in. No, you make yourself attractive. This is like the old dating adage, like you can put yourself on a dating site and make yourself look as amazing as possible, or you can just work on yourself. When you work on yourself, you become more attractive. That's what happens. When the town works on itself, it's more environmentally friendly. It's building up its open space. It's building up its trails. It's a better place to live. It's cleaner. When you also invest in your infrastructure, it's a place that other people want to be. That's how you build economic development. That's the plan. And it's working. And it's working because the second we post economic development stuff, or new apartments, new building, whatever, Amazon coming, Costco coming, people say, oh my God, too much is happening. Then politically, you have the opponent saying nothing's happening. No, a lot's happening. And what's happening is they're happening in the right places. The development is happening on Route 1, along the exits. That's what we want. Aldi, Amazon on an exit ramp. New apartments on an exit at exit 55. New apartments near a train station, near transportation. That makes sense. Open space in Branford Hills. Open space at Tabor. Open space in areas that are strategic for that. And all of these things combine to make Branford a more attractive town. That's what economic development is. It's not some pie in the sky thing that you're going to go out and pull in some biotech, pharmacy, whatever company. Because if you think that's economic development, then you don't understand what economic development is. Because pulling in pharma and pulling in biotech sounds great. It's a great soundbite. But the job of every biotech company is to get bought out. The job of every single one of those small companies is to get grants, do research, and find a bigger company to buy them and go away. That's their business plan. So you can be a place where you put them together and they feed off each other, but they're always going to be in flux. They're always going to change. That's not a fundamentally strong environmental or economic development plan. In fact, a lot of those places, because they expect to move, come and rent. They don't buy. So it sounds great. And you hear everybody say that we need to get biotech in Branford. We have a ton of biotech in Branford, by the way, but it turns over like constantly. And if you haven't seen recently, places like Bayer that destroyed West Haven when they left, or Pfizer that destroyed other towns when they leave, they open large facilities and then they leave, and there's these big vacant places and a lot of empty homes. It's not a strong way to build economic development. It's a good soundbite, though. That rant went way longer than I expected. Was not expecting it. I was going to talk about a few other things today. I do want to talk about this. If you are sports betting, if you're starting, first, be careful. If you don't know how to do it, stop. I might just do a podcast one day just on sports betting. Do not bet just to bet. Don't bet just because it'll make a game more interesting. Don't throw money away. Bet where you see an advantage. But if you're on FanDuel, there's a little button on there called a boost button, and you're going to get really good odds. Well, FanDuel is basically throwing money at people right now to put money into their account. So tonight, for example, I believe you have to bet by 5. But if you have a FanDuel account, go in and you can bet the Red Sox and Astros game to be 2 runs or more, which is a no-brainer. And basically, you can bet up to $100. You win $100, unless the game finishes 1-0, which is unlikely. You win the money. So if you're new to sports betting and you're comfortable jumping in, that's a good place to start tonight as your first bet. FanDuel is basically giving you the money because there's no way you would normally get even odds on something like that. Okay, and I will in future podcasts give some of my picks. Can't guarantee they're all going to be winners, but I'll do the best I can. Okay, I went on way too long about that today, so we'll call it a day there. As soon as we get Neil rescheduled, which will likely be next week, and I may need to I had a special one from Marie Watson, so I'll do that. With the Board of Ed, I've gotten a million emails saying, am I endorsing anybody for the Board of Ed? I think I'm going to stop short of endorsing anybody, but I do want to explain what my criteria is for what I'm looking for. And more than anything, I'm looking for people who are logical people. The problem with the Board of Ed is I don't see any defined goals. And we can yell and scream that Hamlet doesn't communicate right, or we don't like the way Prince does things. Those could be fixed in a short period of time. But long-term, we need people that think long-term and that are good at creating long-term plans, long-term goals, then holding officials accountable to those goals. That's my criteria. My criteria is not who will get in there and get rid of Hamlet or who will get in there and get rid of Prince. That's not my criteria. That said, apparently a special meeting's been called for tonight by John Prince, and the only thing on the agenda is discussing the contract for Hamlet Hernandez. Now, it is November 20th, and there is an election in 2 weeks. It makes 0 sense to make that vote before the election. Now, I'm laughing a little because, during Obama's last year in office and then Trump's last year in office, we had a serious discussion over, a Supreme Court justice died and people thought, should you put someone in or put not somebody in? But in this case where you have something so controversial, it makes no sense. It clearly, calling a special meeting, that's an unscheduled meeting that you're calling. You have to give 24 hours notice, but you're calling it 2 weeks before an election. Clearly, this is inappropriate. No member should actually vote for this. No member should vote to go into executive session. And if you do, no vote should be taken about any extension or lack of extension for the superintendent tonight. It's completely inappropriate. I think Prince probably knows he's not going to be the chairman going forward, so he's taking actions for Hamlet. But it's wrong. And it's wrong in almost every single way. So let's hope tonight, I'll watch that and see what happens, but let's hope tonight that it's not the case. And that puts off till after the election. But I'll talk more about the Board of Ed tomorrow. Okay, that being the case, I went on too long about the town center, but the town center looks great. It's an amazing day. Go to the town center tonight. Go have Ashley's, eat a pasta cozy, grab a sandwich somewhere, and hang out on the green. It's an amazing day. It's an amazing town. We have an amazing center. Make use of it. And I hope everybody has an amazing night. I'll talk to you all tomorrow.